Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey, and in today's video, I'll be running through what the FA Cup results from the weekend mean for the future potential for double and blank game weeks, what Man City progressing in the FA Cup means for blank game week 31, and of course, all of the usual transfer tips to help get you set up ahead of game week 30. Welcome back everyone to another video. Now, if you found today's video valuable and you get something out of it, I would really appreciate it if you could just drop a like on the video, hit subscribe, especially if you're new around here. And let's start off in a slightly unusual format where we're going to talk about the FA Cup results from the weekend and what that means for double game week 33 and blank game week 34. Now, the reason that the FA Cup results from this weekend are important for a game week way down the line is that if a team gets to the semi-finals of the FA Cup, then their game week fixture in game week 34 is likely to get moved around because the FA Cup semi-finals are happening that weekend as well. That will obviously be the semi-final. We're only moving into the quarter-final now, but with one game to go, i.e. the quarter-final, we can start piecing together the teams that are most likely to progress to the semi-final and therefore the most likely teams to get a blank game week in 34 and potentially a double game week in 33. So far, I've mapped it out on the left-hand side. You can see the game week 34 fixtures. 4 of them are now confirmed. I forgot the arrow and the bottom one because it was the last game to update. But Sunderland versus Nottingham Forest, Fulham versus Aston Villa, Wolves versus Spurs, and now Man United versus Brentford are all locked in, confirmed to go ahead in game week 34 because both sets of teams in each of those fixtures are out of the FA Cup. In all of the other fixtures that are going ahead in game week 34 at the moment, there is one team left in the FA Cup going into the quarter-final round. And as you can see on the right-hand side, I've got the draw for the quarter-final up. Now, there are 6 Premier League sides still in the competition out of a potential 8. That leaves Southampton, my team, there's a reason I'm wearing this kit today, and Port Vale, both in the quarterfinals. Now, if either of them spring an upset, then that would mean less doubles going into game week 33 and less blank game weeks in 34, because if Southampton beat Arsenal, fingers crossed for me, of course, unlikely as it is, then Arsenal would be out of the FA Cup and their fixture against Newcastle could go ahead in game week 34 as previously planned. The same goes for Chelsea if they go out against Port Vale. Now, obviously, Arsenal and Chelsea are going to be heavy favourites for those respective fixtures, and we'll go into the most likely double game weeks in just a moment's time. But we do have 2 Premier League clashes in the FA Cup quarter-final between Man City and Liverpool. That will be a very important match to get the result out of. And then you've got West Ham against Leeds United as well. Now, both of them are going to be tightly contested matches. It could go either way, and it's quite hard to predict which of those teams is going to make it through to the semi-final. So we're acting still with imperfect information. But what is important to know is that we're one game away. We've got a set of now 6 fixtures that could potentially be a blank in game week 34 and therefore potentially moved to another game week. So let's take a look at what the odds are of the different combinations for these teams. Okay, so on this screen, I've picked out the 12 teams that have the potential for their fixture in game week 34 to be moved elsewhere, and the odds, according to Solio, which is in tune with live market data and of course very good fixture planners, to figure out what the percentage chances of those fixtures being moved to game week 33 are. So it's not actually just as simple as if it's a blank in game week 34, or if they get to the semi-final, then that fixture gets moved automatically to game week 33. It's a little bit more complicated than that, and I'll run through some examples in just a moment's time. Let's start off in the top left. The most likely fixture to get moved from game week 34 to game week 33 is Newcastle versus Arsenal, or rather Arsenal versus Newcastle, because Arsenal are at home. That is currently around 84% likely to happen because Arsenal are in the quarter-final of the FA Cup. They need to win one more game, and that game is against Championship opposition Southampton. Now, I will say, as a Southampton fan, we're in good nick at the moment. We're winning a lot of matches and playing very well. So I wouldn't take it as a given that Arsenal are going to win, but they will be heavy favourites, and the odds here reflect that. They are away from home, though, so that's another one to know. So Arsenal and Newcastle, because Newcastle are the team that they play in Game Week 34, are likely to have their fixture moved to Game Week 33 if they beat Southampton in the quarterfinals. Moving down, you might be wondering why the odds of Chelsea getting a double Game Week 33 fixture are slightly lower than Arsenal, despite the fact that they're playing at home to League One opposition Port Vale, which seems like an easier fixture on paper. Well, the reason that the odds are lower, 71% in fact, than Arsenal and Newcastle to go into Game Week 33 is that it's not as simple as just every fixture gets moved from Game Week 34 out to Game Week 33. It's also slightly dependent on European progression for the teams in that fixture. So if Chelsea were to continue their progress in the Champions League, then it makes it almost a given that they have to move this fixture, if they make it through the quarterfinal, of course, to Game Week 33. But if they go out of the Champions League to PSG, not an easy game. I think they're very slightly favourites, but it will be a tight game. No one knows which way that's going to go. If they go out in this round of the Champions League, then it's possible that this fixture between Chelsea and Brighton could just be shifted to another point in Game Week 34, a little bit later into the midweek, because they'd have a midweek free. They wouldn't have the Champions League to worry about. So that is also slightly playing into the odds of some of the teams here. The same goes for Man City as well, by the way. Obviously, a fantastic fixture to be added to Game Week 33 if they do progress against Liverpool in the FA Cup quarter-final. Then they would have their Burnley fixture rearranged, probably going into Game Week 33. Now, the reason that Man City and Crystal Palace and Liverpool are all very interesting in this dynamic is that Man City already have another game that needs to be rescheduled. That is against Crystal Palace, and both Man City and Crystal Palace are still in Europe. So it could get really quite tight for the fixture planners to figure out other spaces in which to put these matches. And the fact that it's Liverpool versus Crystal Palace in Game Week 34 makes things even more complicated, because whoever wins out of Man City or Liverpool in the quarter-final of the FA Cup, well, their fixture in Game Week 34 would naturally want to be moved forward to Game Week 33. But even if that did happen, Crystal Palace and Man City will still have another fixture to rearrange. So what does that mean? Well, that basically means that it's now very, very likely that there will be another double game week later on in the season involving Man City and Crystal Palace, because they've still got to rearrange that fixture, and it looks extremely unlikely it's going to be able to be rearranged for Game Week 33 now, because you know for a fact that one of Man City or Liverpool are going to progress into the semi-final of the FA Cup. And even if both of them exited Europe, you've still got Crystal Palace in Europe, and you've still got another game to be replayed anyway. So that might get a little bit confusing, but the summary there is that there is likely to be another small double game week involving Man City and Crystal Palace later on in the season. Looking at the odds, though, Arsenal and Newcastle are the favourites to get a double game week 33 fixture, followed by Chelsea and Brighton. Man City are marginal favourites over Liverpool in that game, but it could go either way. And you could see either Man City getting a double game week of Arsenal and Burnley, or you could see a double game week for Liverpool of Everton and Crystal Palace. So either way, you've got some big players playing in double game week 33 and probably a good couple of captaincy options. Moving down to the less likely doubles, you've got Bournemouth, Leeds, West Ham and Everton. And those two are actually linked together because it's West Ham versus Leeds in the next round of the FA Cup. Whichever one progresses will have to have their fixture moved. But because none of those four teams, either the teams progressing in the FA Cup or their opponents, are in Europe in any form, they could have their fixture just pushed into the midweek of game week 34 rather than made into a double game week in 33. So because that's possible, the odds of getting a double game week 33 fixture for all of those four teams are around 1 in 4. So it doesn't really matter which of those two teams progresses between West Ham or Leeds. It's relatively likely that their fixtures actually just get left in game week 34 at a later date, just somewhere in the midweek. Now, it's still possible it gets brought forward to game week 33 because they might just do it with all of the fixtures, but it's less likely than the other ones. So hopefully that all makes sense, and do feel free to save the video to come back to for later references. But as you can see on the chart, you've got the most likely doublers being Arsenal, Newcastle, Chelsea, Brighton, and then you've probably got one of Man City or Liverpool doubling alongside their respective opponents. Then you might get one of the or two of the final four teams also doubling as well. Okay, so hopefully all of that FA Cup stuff, the doubles, the blanks, all makes sense. If not, do leave a comment below, by the way, and I'll try and answer as many questions as I can. But let's start talking about Game Week 30, which is, of course, the game week that we're most interested in at the moment. One thing I do want to mention before we get into the actual players is the fact that we've got European commitments in the midweek leading up to Game Week 30, and then also European commitments after Game Week 30 as well. And some of the teams have really difficult matches and very tight turnarounds either side of Game Week 30. So I've mapped out on screen is it 9 teams playing in Europe over the midweek and then in the midweek following, and their respective fixtures in Game Week 30, including what date it's going to be on, either the Saturday or the Sunday. So I'll start off with the Champions League teams because I think they're the really interesting ones. You've got Arsenal away at Leverkusen on the Wednesday, followed by a Saturday game against Everton, and then a home game against Leverkusen on the Tuesday. Now, that Wednesday to Tuesday turnaround in the Champions League is really cruel because it means you've got 6 days in which you have to play 3 fixtures, including that Saturday fixture. And you've only got 2 full days of rest between those fixtures. So you've got Leverkusen Wednesday, Thursday, Friday to rest, probably train a little bit, and then Everton on the Saturday. Now, Arsenal have it maybe a little bit easier than some of the other teams I'm about to mention. One, because Leverkusen aren't flying massively high in the Bundesliga right now. They're still a very good side, but we'll come on to some more difficult fixtures in a minute. But also, once they've played the away leg, they come back to London and they'll stay in London for the Everton game and the Leverkusen game because they're at home for both. So they might be able to get a little bit more rest there. Now, moving on to Man City, I think they're the hardest done by here because they have to go away to Real Madrid. Really tough game, of course, at the Bernabeu. Then they've got that 2 full day gap where they'll be flying back on the Thursday, you would think. Probably rest on the Friday. Maybe they get in a little training session, but then they've also got to travel down to London for West Ham away from home, followed by, again, a quick turnaround to Real Madrid on the Tuesday at home. Now, what does that mean for players like Erling Haaland, who's been rested quite a lot recently? He might be dealing with a little bit of an injury. Semenyo's been getting very good minutes, but now that he's registered for the Champions League, could you see him rested or maybe get reduced minutes against West Ham to keep him fresh for the second leg? Possibly. And the list goes on. You've got loads of players that will be relevant to at Man City. But it's also relevant to a team like Chelsea, who go away to PSG. Again, very difficult game. Then, luckily for them, they're back to London. So obviously, Paris is not far from London anyway. They could even get the Eurostar. And then they play on the Saturday against Newcastle at Stamford Bridge. And then again, host PSG at Stamford Bridge on the Tuesday. So it's a tight turnaround. I think you will see some minutes reduced in that Saturday fixture against Newcastle if they can. But considering it's not an easy opponent, and then at least they're at home, the rotation might not be quite as bad as it might be for Man City. Now, Liverpool and Spurs have that nicer turnaround where they play on the Tuesday, followed by the Sunday, followed by the Wednesday. So the gaps for them aren't anywhere near as bad. You've got 4 days full rest for Liverpool after Galatasaray before Spurs. And then again, they're at home in both of those. So Spurs and Galatasaray from Sunday onwards, they'll just stay in Liverpool. Spurs do have 2 away games. They've got Atletico Madrid and Liverpool away from home, and then Atletico Madrid at home on the Wednesday following. But in all honesty, I don't want to reflect too much on Spurs because not many of us have their players, and their turnaround times are not that bad either, even if you did have them. You finally then got the other European competitions. So you've got Aston Villa playing in the Europa League, you've got Nottingham Forest with the same, and Crystal Palace in the Europa Conference League. They've all got 2-day turnarounds, or 2-day gaps, after their Thursday evening fixtures before they play on the Sunday. So could a team like Aston Villa, with a pretty thin squad at the moment, a lot of midfielders out injured, could they potentially be a little bit leggy come Man United on the Sunday away from home? Possibly. Same goes for Nottingham Forest. Even though they're playing at home, they've got that 2-day gap after their Europa League game before Fulham at home. So you might see 1 or 2 players get reduced minutes. I think Elliot Anderson owners, you're probably fine. Same goes finally for team like Crystal Palace, although it's at home, you've got that quite short turnaround. So it's one to monitor. But again, I just wanted to show everyone and illustrate what I mean when I talk about the tight turnarounds because of the European commitments, especially for Man City, but also teams like Arsenal, Chelsea, and some of the Europa League contestants as well will have those tight turnarounds. You might see some minutes managed. Okay, so on the back of the European commitments, let's talk about Erling Haaland, who has been rested in the FA Cup in the round of 16, has had a few issues recently. And also, I've talked about it a lot on this channel, but since they've switched systems to that two-striker system where Semenyo or Marmoush play as almost split strikers alongside Erling Haaland might not be quite as effective an FPL asset as he has been in the past. Now, that's not to say he's a bad player, because even though his goal share might go down, considering they're playing with the split strikers, his shot volume's coming down, his big chances per 90 are coming down, he's still much better than the majority of FPL players. So I don't want to go out and say that he's a washed player, you should all sell him, he's going to be terrible. If he plays, he's still as likely as pretty much any other player in the game to haul. I just think proportionately, compared to past Erling Haaland, his odds of hauling are very slightly lower. Now, when you also bake in the fact that he is dealing with a little bit of a problem at the moment, or has been recently, and they play Real Madrid with that tight turnaround either side of the West Ham game, following that, they blank in game week 31, which is now pretty much confirmed because they made it through against Newcastle. All of that to say that I don't think it's essential you do hold on to him anymore. And if you think those minutes are going to be reduced against West Ham, I think there's a pretty strong argument to downgrade him to another striker, especially one who's very much in form at the moment. We'll come on to in a moment's time. But you could downgrade him and use that money elsewhere to give yourself a full playing 11 in game week 31, because again, you're removing a blank game week player ahead of time here, but also maybe spending that money in midfield where there are a couple of options that you might be more interested in. So again, I don't want to spend too long on him because we know he's a great player. No one here is suggesting that he's never going to score Premier League goals ever again. But for this very short period of time, if you're of the belief that he gets reduced minutes against West Ham, or who knows, maybe he even gets benched altogether, if that tight turnaround against Real Madrid is something that Pep is going to want to focus on, making sure his best 11 is going up against Real Madrid, then I can see a pretty strong argument to getting rid of him. And all eyes will be on that Real Madrid game to see whether or not Haaland gets through unscathed, whether they're in a good position going into the second leg. And from that, we might be able to glean some information as to whether or not he is likely to get benched or rested a little bit in that West Ham game. If that's the case, I think there's a pretty good argument to get rid of him for a very short period of time, especially if you don't have much value tied up in him. And he's down to 14.6 million. I bought him at 14.2. So I've only got that gap of 0.2 selling value because I'll sell him for 14.4. I reckon he goes down to that by the time I want to buy him back on my wildcard. So I think there's a pretty reasonable opportunity to sell if you think the minutes are going to be reduced in game week 30. Okay, so if you are in the market for a striker this week for whatever reason, then João Pedro is going to be right at the top of the list. Newcastle at home, followed by Everton away. And although Chelsea play a very tough game in the Champions League against PSG, Newcastle also have a tough game against Barcelona in the Champions League. So can you say that Chelsea are going to be any more leggy than Newcastle going into game week 30? I'm not so sure you can. And Chelsea look in great goal scoring form at the moment. Then in game week 31, they've got that guarantee of Everton away as well. So João Pedro is going to be one of the most popular players to buy this week. I'm pretty sure he will be the most popular player to buy going into game week 30, as long as he gets through the Champions League first leg against PSG unscathed. But I just wanted to reference this excellent graphic from Rob T FPL. Do go check him out on social media, by the way, that shows the overperformance of João Pedro over the last 8 game weeks. But the overperformance isn't what I'm massively interested in here. It's actually the other axis, which shows the expected goals and assists out of all players over the last 8 game weeks. And yes, he is overperforming massively. You can see him right at the top of the graphic there. But when you look at the expected goals and assists, he's also ahead of all other FPL picks right now as well. Marginally ahead of Cole Palmer, his teammate, ahead of Bruno Fernandes, and ahead of all other players over the last 8 game weeks. So is he overperforming? Yes. But also, is he expecting to get more goals and assists than any other player right now? Yes. So if you think his minutes are going to be good going into Newcastle at home, I think he's a very strong buy. And considering he plays in game week 31, if you are of the mindset that Haaland's going to be rested a bit against West Ham, I think there's a good argument to just make that move early and get João Pedro now. Then I suppose the conversation is, are there other strikers you'd prefer? Like Ekatike, like Thiago, maybe like Jared Bowen as well. I think considering the form he's in right now, João Pedro would be my favoured option. Now, Thiago's got better fixtures, but is nowhere near the same sort of form. In fact, you can see him on the graphic here, 4 expected goals plus assists over the last 8 game weeks. Is it bad? No. But it's about half of what João Pedro's put up in that time. And Ekatike as well. He's coasting along pretty nicely, just under 6 goals and assists expected over the last 8 game weeks. Again, it's good. I wouldn't be selling him for João Pedro. But if you've got a spot in your team and you're picking between João Pedro, Ekatike, Thiago, I think the form he's in and the fact that he is top of the expected goals and assists, I'd probably put him out ahead of all of the other options. And I am considering buying him for Erling Haaland after the Champions League minutes are baked into my thinking. Now, I think if someone were to ask me what has been the most frustrating thing about FPL this season, it's that at no point there's been loads of different premium options that have all been in good form, and we've had to make a really tough choice between all of them. Almost from the get-go, it's been Erling Haaland and not much else. But I think for the next couple of game weeks, if you are on that game week 32 wildcard strategy especially, then both Salah and Palmer can be in your thinking. Now, neither of them have been excellent picks across the season. Salah, in fact, for 14 million has been a pretty awful pick considering the price you're paying. But they're both getting good minutes at the moment, and they've both got reasonable enough fixtures for the next 2 game weeks where if you do want to spend that Erling Haaland money elsewhere, and I'm not saying you do, you might want to hold on to him, and that is absolutely fair enough. But if you are of the mindset that he gets reduced minutes against West Ham and then obviously doesn't play in game week 31, you might want to sell him, and then you've got a load of money to spend elsewhere. And then you can look at players like Cole Palmer, like Mo Salah as options. Not to say that you have to go for them and you have to spend the money, because you absolutely don't, considering the form these players have been in across the season. But I think both of them do still represent decent upside, because at the end of the day, they both play for fantastic attacking teams. They both have reasonable goal share. Salah's has gone down a fair bit this season, it's fair to say, but it's still not terrible. And they are both on penalties as well. So you could just get a bit lucky. Maybe they get 2 penalties over the next 2 game weeks. And if you're looking for a captaincy option in both of game week 30 and 31, I think either Salah or Palmer are reasonable options for captaincy. Now, if I was picking one of the two and someone asked me, okay, I'm looking at buying a premium midfielder, no matter what, which one would I go for? I think it's a tough choice, because I think marginally Salah has the better fixtures over the next 2 game weeks. That Spurs game in particular looks like a fantastic opportunity to captain a differential on penalties. We know that he's got the potential to go big. And Spurs, like Liverpool, also play in the Champions League, arguably have a tougher game in Atletico Madrid than Galatasaray for Liverpool. So I think it's a good option to be going after Liverpool attackers. It's just such a shame that Mo Salah, he's not been in terrible form recently, but he's not hit the heights that we're used to. So we've not really seen any evidence of him getting near to a big haul anytime recently. However, we know that it's possible because he's got all of those routes to points, and it is just a bit of a roll of the dice that maybe if you're the one who goes for him now and goes against the crowd, maybe you're chasing rank in a major way. Maybe you want to regain points on your mini league rivals and you're 50, 60 points off. I think this is a good opportunity to take that gamble, because although most people won't go there because he's not been in great form and the data's not been great either, I think the next 2 fixtures are potential haul fixtures for Mo Salah. Again, I can't guarantee anything. I can't predict the future, but I am tempted to go there myself. Would I go for him over Cole Palmer, though, who's got better XGI per 90? I would say out of the 2 teams, Chelsea are maybe more free-flowing going forward at the moment. They seem to be in a better rhythm. He's got a great partnership with João Pedro. And Newcastle at home, Everton away aren't bad fixtures either. So I might be tempted to say, actually, considering the form that Parma and Chelsea have been in very recently, and if we were to go back to that expected goals graphic a minute ago, Parma was second just behind João Pedro for expected goals and assists. So although over the season he's not been great, recently his minutes have actually been pretty good. It looks like the injury stuff is maybe starting to creep into the past a little bit. And if he gets through the PSG game, I think the Newcastle game looks like a pretty good fixture for him as well. So I think out of the two, who am I more confident on getting great minutes for the next 2 game weeks? I think Salah, because Palmer has got those slight injury doubts in the recent history, but I like both of them, and Palmer's data is a bit better, and he's also putting up the better underlying data over the last 8 game weeks, so his form's a little bit better as well. So it's a tight one. But I think with captaincy in my thinking, I'd be tempted to gamble on Mo Salah. Okay, so I'm going to talk about a few different midfielders to wrap up the video. First off, Morgan Rogers, still well owned in my team and in a lot of teams of FPL managers who are very frustrated with him. Because let's be fair, he's been pretty awful as an FPL pick for a little while now. And as close as he was to returning in game week 29, he didn't do much else. About 3mm off an assist that might have kept all of those worries at bay. But at the end of the day, he didn't get the assist. Villa did not play that well against Chelsea at all. And now they go up away against Man United, who are one of the informed teams in the league at the moment. The underlying data hasn't been great across the season, 0.29 XGI per 90. That's really quite poor. It's just that he does tend to overperform on that data. He's got 13 attacking returns so far, including 8 goals. And actually, if you look back at the reverse fixtures, so Man United at home and West Ham away earlier on this season, he got 15 pointers in both of them. So it's not impossible that he can get attacking returns against these teams. I do just question the likelihood of it, I suppose. And he is the player out of all of the Premier League players at the moment that I would say, you know what, even if the data's not there, I'd expect him to score the odd banger and he'll get the odd haul because he's Morgan Rogers. He's a quality player and he does love an outside of the box shot. So I don't think he's a must sell, but if you've got 3 or 4 free transfers and you don't have a massive problem ahead of you in game week 31 regarding players that blank, then I think I would be looking at alternatives to Morgan Rogers. But it does feel like a luxury move that you can only really consider if you've got the spare transfers available to sort out future problems with the blanking players in game week 31. For me, I'm probably going to just cross my fingers and hope that he gets one of those bangers in the next couple of game weeks against Man United or West Ham, as unlikely as that seems right now. But because I've not got the spare transfers, it would be a -4 to probably get rid of him. Or if I got rid of him now, it wouldn't be a -4, but it would be a future -4 to get rid of a blanking player in game week 31. So it's effectively a -4 to get rid of Morgan Rogers in the first place. So for me, in my position, I'm holding on to him. But I think if you've got a few free transfers, then by all means, use a transfer to get rid of Morgan Rogers, because there are other midfielders out there I like the upside of. Okay, so another midfielder that a lot of people are talking about this week is Harry Wilson. And he's been a bit of a complicated situation because he's been injured. And if he wasn't injured, I don't think we'd even be making this section. Or if I was, it would be a very short one, just saying, wait a week and then buy him if you don't have him already. Or if you've got him, you're loving life, because he's 6 million. He's got decent underlying attacking data. He's in the form of his career returns wise. 17 attacking returns this season is fantastic. And although Nottingham Forest isn't the best fixture on paper, they're playing in the Europa League, so they might be a bit knackered anyway. And then it's Burnley after that at home. So Wilson, for me, if fit, is one of the players I'd be immediately buying in game week 31. Maybe not in game week 30 specifically, but it's also not bad if you've got him already. The problem is he's been injured recently. He also missed the FA Cup round of 16 fixture against my team, Southampton, didn't even make the bench. So we're going to have to wait to hear for more information on Wilson from Marco Silva in the run up to game week 30. I think the fortunate thing for owners is we've got another game week to go before the really nice fixture. Burnley at home is when you really want him. Nottingham Forest away is fine. You'd play him quite happily. But if you've got a little bit of depth on your bench, then you could just play that player for one game week and hope we get some better news on Wilson. And even if he does miss out against Nottingham Forest in game week 30, the chances of him being back for 31 are still pretty good. So If I had him, I would not be selling him unless we get some sort of news from Marco Silva saying he's out for weeks and weeks and weeks and therefore won't even play the Burnley fixture. But I think if you've got him at this point, you hold on, hoping that he's ready for game week 31 specifically, with the chance that he could even be back for game week 30. For anyone looking at buying him, again, you're in quite a nice position where you don't need to make a move this week, but it's next week that you're hoping for some more clear-cut information and probably a much easier buy ahead of Burnley. Okay, so I just wanted to wrap up the video by talking about one midfielder that I would be looking at buying specifically in game week 30 if I was in the market for one, and that would be Marcus Tavernier. At 5.3 million, he does basically tick all of the boxes I would like in an FPL pick. Good underlying data, 0.3 XG per 90 is very, very good, especially for this price point. A good bit of assist threat in there as well. He's on penalties. He's fairly talismanic for Bournemouth, and he takes some set pieces as well. And now that his fitness doubts are a thing of the past, he should be locked in to play 80 plus minutes in the next 2 game weeks. The next 2 game weeks are also very nice fixtures. You've got Burnley away from home, then Man United at home in the blank. So again, no problems there whatsoever. And in fact, the carrot fixture is game week 30. So if you did want to buy a midfielder right now, I would be prioritising the Bournemouth midfielders away at Burnley, who are shipping goals for fun at the moment. And with all of those positives in mind, the final really crucial one is that he's under 2% owned. He's massively, massively differential at the moment. And although he is being talked about quite a lot in content, in videos, in the community, on X or on Blue Sky, it just goes to show what a silo we live in, because even though he is getting quite a lot of hype at the moment, nearly nobody owns him outside of the community. 1.7% is ridiculously differential. You will get a massive gain out of him if he hauls in your side over the next 2 game weeks. And considering it's Burnley next up, I think if you are looking for a midfielder right now, especially a cheap one, he'd be right at the top of my list. Now, as we reach the end of today's video, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a like, hit subscribe if you're new around here, and as always, drop any comments below if you've got any questions, because I realise I ran through quite a lot of information, especially towards the start of the video.